The Bible prophesies a future alliance between a one-world government and a one-world religion. Is the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit to be held in New York on September 25 through 27 a glimpse of that prophesied union of church and state? We will answer this question today on Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it.
Welcome to Politics and Religion, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins. I thank you for joining me today. And we're going to be talking about world government and a major move towards world government that's coming up in just the next few weeks. I want to cover that. And so on today's program, I want to show you how the upcoming United Nations Sustainable Development Summit held at the United Nations in New York on September 25th through the 27th is a huge move towards one world government. But not only is this a major move towards world government, but with the endorsement of Pope Francis, it is giving us a glimpse of the union of church and state prophesied to be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. The Bible prophesies that just prior to and at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ, the world will be under the reign of a one world government. But that's not all. That one world government will also be in alliance with a one world religious system that it will use on an as needed basis to further its agenda. It will be a union of politics and religion, the two things you never talk about. Folks, let me tell you that the world government is already established. It just doesn't have the teeth that they want yet, but they are quickly growing a very sharp set as we speak. Furthermore, the world religious system that will form an alliance with this world government has been forming for several decades, with major moves towards that world religion over the last 12 to 24 months. Well, internationalists, or those that place their hope, faith, and trust in a world governing body, believe that there are three root causes of conflict in the world today: political, religious, and economic conflicts. To them, the solution to these three issues is a one world government, a one world religious system, and a global economy. So the entire chapter of Revelation 13 is devoted to end-time issues. Verses 1 through 8 are devoted to this one world governing system prophesied to be in power at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Verses 11 through 14 are devoted to the one world religious system and the ruler of that religious system, the false prophet. And then verses 16 through 18 deal with the one world economic system, most commonly referred to as the mark of the beast. So all of the moves that we see today towards a world government, world religious system, and global economic system were prophesied in Scripture 2,000 years ago. However, the ultimate goal for every internationalist or globalist or federalist is a one world governing body. That one world governing body that's prophesied in Revelation 13 that will control the lives of every single person on earth. That's you and I. And the Bible says that this is exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a world governing body formed. The problem is that the Bible also tells us that the Antichrist, who will be many times worse than Adolf Hitler ever was, will eventually rule the entire entity. So, remember that the prophesied arrangement for the near future will be a world government that will use a religious body to further its agenda. Look at how for the last several decades the popes have called for a world governing body. Pope John XXIII in 1963, Pope Paul VI in 1965 and 1967, and Pope Benedict in 2009 all called for a world or global political authority to solve the crisis of the day. And believe me, they have always had a crisis to push, whether real or imagined, to push their certain agendas. Of course, this call for a true political authority or world government was echoed in Pope Francis's encyclical On the Care for Our Common Home, published this past June. In Pope Francis's encyclical, he mentioned that the solution of the global warming and climate change hoax is sustainable development and sustainable principles. Pope Francis stated that the urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together and seek a sustainable, integral development. This is very key because this encyclical was published in June, a few short months before the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit to be held in September. Do you think it's a coincidence that Pope Francis is speaking at this Sustainable Development Summit? His climate change encyclical only mentions sustainable development or sustainable principles 21 specific times. Folks, let me tell you, politicians are not above enlisting the help of a religious leader or anybody else to accomplish their goals. Therefore, it's no coincidence that Pope Francis in April met with United Nations Secretary General at the Vatican, presidents of Italy and Ecuador, and Nobel laureates, and leading scientists on climate change and sustainable development. In June, he published an encyclical devoted to climate change and his proposed solution to that crisis, a world government. Then in July, he hosted at the Vatican 60 mayors from around the world to keep pressure on world leaders ahead of the UN climate negotiations in Paris later this year by signing the document Modern Slavery and Climate Change. The document states human-induced climate change is a scientific reality and its effective control is a moral imperative for humanity. Then, now coming up in September, the Pope will speak to the United Nations General Assembly, and listen at this, according to the International Institute for Sustainable Development, in February 2015, the United General Assembly President Sam Katisa proposed adjusting the beginning of the summit down to 11 a.m. on September 25 to allow for an address by Pope Francis at 9 a.m. So they want the Pope to start it off. This is the same meeting where the United Nations is scheduled to agree to a new set of sustainable development goals. You say, so what's the big deal? Well, if you look at this, and I've talked about this for years. We talk about this in our Bible studies. Irvin Baxter's talked about this for years. It's the major move that we're seeing towards a world governing body. The Sustainable Development Summit looks towards, and it's already been established. That's a given. If you look at Irvin Baxter just had G. Edward Griffin on his program here, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago. G. Edward Griffin he's with the John Birch Society. He's spoken for them several times. And I've read several of his books, The Creature from Jekyll Island, a lot of different things, and he tells how, in intricate detail, how the United Nations was set up to be a world governing body from the establishment of it in 1945. The charter for the United Nations was written by Alger Hisser, who was helped to be penned by Al Jarhis, who was a convicted communist spy. So whenever you look at the United Nations and this sustainable development goals, the Millennium Development Goals, anything they're trying to do, it's to further the world governing body that they're trying to establish. And let me tell you that it is already functioning here in the United States. You say, well, hold on, Dave. In the United States of America, the United Nations already has its teeth sunk in? Oh, absolutely. As we go throughout the program here, I want to show you how intricately involved the United Nations is in the implementation of its agenda, or if you're familiar with Agenda 21, the sustainability agenda, it's already been implemented years ago, decades ago. And our presidents signed on to it and signed us to promote this sustainability agenda all the way down to the local level. And it's already implemented in hundreds of cities here in the United States. So when we talk about this sustainability summit coming up in September, we're looking at a huge move towards world government, a further move, further than we already are. And what they're trying to do, they're tightening the noose is what's going on. They're looking at the world and they're saying, okay, we want a fully functioning, totalitarian one world government. How can we do that? What can we do? You know, they can't just walk in and say, okay, we're taking over. So what they do is they come in peaceably and they'll implement this little part of the agenda, then they'll implement this. And before you know it, it's like Gulliver. You remember the story of Gulliver's Travel. One little string, and he could have broke it easily. But when he woke up that next morning, those real little people had strings all over him. And he couldn't break them because they had come in subtly and done this. And so consequently, it's the same thing that the United Nations is doing with these Millennium Development Goals, the sustainability goals. This summit that's coming up is they're slowly weaving a huge web all around the world, and they're tightening the noose on everybody. It's not just here in America, it's worldwide. And as we go throughout the program today, I'm going to show you how intricate that web really is. And just like it says in the prophecies of the Bible, that they're kind of teaming up with a one world religious system to help implement this one world governing agenda. Now, the Bible says that they will use that religious entity for so long and then they'll actually do away with it. They won't need it anymore because the true goal is not the unity of politics and religion. The goal is this one world governing body. And the Bible, you say, well, who's behind all this? Well, it's real simple. The Bible says that the dragon gave this world governing body its seat and great power. The dragon, spoken of in Revelation 13, is Satan. Satan is behind all of this. Satan has always wanted a one world governing body and people to pledge allegiance to it rather than God. So that's the goal. So what are we looking at? You say, well, are all these guys serving Satan? They don't know it, but that's what all is behind all of this. So as we go out throughout the program today, I'm going to show you how intricately involved we are in the agenda of this world governing body. And I think you're going to be surprised at how much it's already been implemented in the United States. I know I was when I started studying this. So I'll see you after the break, and we'll go down through here and continue on the agenda of the United Nations.
Join Endtime Prophecy students in Jerusalem. Now, for the first time, you can study at the Jerusalem Prophecy College from the convenience of your own home through our new online learning system. Attend classes taught by Dr. Irvin Baxter and learn about the prophecies of the Bible that will come to pass in the near future. Interact with fellow students as you study the Bible and become equipped to effectively minister to others in the end time. Applications are now being accepted for the fall semester, which begins September 7th. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com for more information.
Attention McLeod in Princeton, Texas, Indianapolis, and South Bend, Indiana. Irvin Baxter's coming to your area for an Endtime conference. He will be speaking on subjects such as Sign of the Four Blood Moons and America's God-Given Destiny. Endtime conferences are a great opportunity to meet Irvin and hear the latest events going on in Bible prophecy. Shop Endtime product and meet other people like you who are wanting to learn the prophecies of the Bible. Every time I go to an Endtime conference, I feel so energized, like one of the people that can be strong and do exploits, as Daniel 11:32 says. Go to endtime.com and under events, click the conference link or call 1-800-ENDTIME to find out more details about these conferences. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to Politics and Religion, everybody. What we're talking about today is the major move towards a world governing body coming up here in September. It's the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit. It's going to be held in New York from the 25th through the 27th of September. They're actually going to have Pope Francis speak first on the 25th, and then they will start the agenda to adopt a new set of sustainable development goals to replace the Millennium Development Goals, which are expiring this year. And so I'm showing you today on the program how much their fingers are already interwoven through the fabric of the United States and what they're trying to do. If you can think about it, it's like a huge web that they're putting around the whole world. It's like a huge spider. Think of it like that, because it's just one strand at a time, one little part of the agenda, one little soft law, one little different thing they're trying to implement. And before you know it, there's a web around the whole world. That's exactly what's going on with these sustainability agenda. So you say, well, what's the big deal, Dave? I know, I hear about all, this is just another summit coming down the line. You know, is it really a move towards a one world governing body? Well, let me answer the question by going down this route. What is the sustainability agenda? Well, in short, the ultimate impact of the sustainability agenda is a massive transformation of social, political, technological, cultural, and behavioral processes which impact how mankind produces and consumes. So they're drilling it right down to production and consumption of every human being. That's how far this thing goes. In other words, sustainability affects every single aspect of life on earth. Green initiatives attempt to modify human behavior to reward us for how we eat, work, travel, and play more sustainably. Sustainable development, now this is very key. Sustainable development is a catchphrase used by activists and government agencies involved in the implementation of Agenda 21. A lot of you have heard that term, and we get questions about it all the time because it's been implemented for years, which according to the UN's own website, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, not somewhere 10,000 miles overseas, every nation of the globe, nationally and locally, right down to Dallas, Texas, right down to New York, San Francisco, Chicago, right down to local Williamsburg, Indiana, population 800. They want to dial it right down to every person on earth by organizations of the United Nations. They want the United Nations to come in and tell how Wiley, Texas, or somebody, Mesquite, Texas, right down to the local level, and each and every individual as well, in your own home. So, it's a system, governments and major groups in every area which humans impact the environment. So, the ultimate goal of Agenda 21 is the control by United Nations and a future one world government of all human settlements, determining where one can live and what land should be used for. A quote from J. Gary Lawrence. He was an advisor to President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development, stated, participating in a UN advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy fixated groups and individuals in our society. So they know exactly what they're doing. This segment of our society who fear a one world government, well, it's not necessary. When I look at that statement, I don't necessarily fear a one world government. If it was a one world government run by Christians, had Christian principles and a biblical foundational principles, I could do that. And a UN invasion of the United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking LA 21 or the local Agenda 21. So we call our processes something else. They're secretive, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. So the plan is to implement Agenda 21, but just call it another name. And let me tell you, that's exactly what they've done. If you go to most of your local communities, you go to a courthouse and things like that, or you want to get a building permit, what can you do on your land? Consumption, production. You have to get things approved. You got to get building permits. You got to get all this stuff. And they want to drill down what you can do with your land, what you can do with your property. They want to control every aspect. That's what Agenda 21 is all about. Do your research. Go read this stuff. They drill it right down to you, right into your own personal life. So, according to AmericanPolicy.org, U.S. President, you say, well, is this in the United States? Are our presidents, are our administrations, have they been for this? U.S. President George H.W. Bush signed the Agenda 21 document for the U.S. In signing, each nation pledged to adopt the goals of Agenda 21. President George Bush did that years ago. In 1993, now this shows you how far back it is. In 1993, President Bill Clinton, in compliance with Agenda 21, signed Executive Order 12852 to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development in order to harmonize U.S. environmental policy with UN directives as outlined in Agenda 21. The executive order directed all agencies of the federal government to work with state and local community governments in a joint effort to reinvent government using the guidelines outlined in Agenda 21. Are you hearing what I'm saying? We signed this into law, President Bill Clinton, in 93. So this has been implemented since then, and it's in every fiber of the United States. As a result, with the assistance of groups like the ICLEI, sustainable development is now emerging as government policies in hundreds of towns, counties, and states in America. You say, well, where are we at now? Well, President Barack Obama stated in a speech in January 21st, 2010, he says, our strategy is to build economically competitive, environmentally sustainable, opportunity-rich communities that serve as the backbone for our long-term growth and prosperity. We need strategies that encourage smart development linked to quality public transportation that bring our communities together. That's why we will improve our partnership for sustainable communities. So the Obama administration bought into this years ago. Of course, if you're really going to get in that office and that administration nowadays, you've got to buy into this. That's just part of it. So the United Nations Agenda 21 principles are already being implemented in hundreds of our cities right here in America. You say, well, how? Well, one way is smart meters. According to the American Policy Center, control of energy and water are the two most effective tools in the enforcement of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Without energy and water, human society pretty much stops. Using strict controls on how or even if energy and water can be used provides government with the power to dictate every aspect of society. So how is that control carried out? Well, there are obviously several ways, including regulations and taxes on production of gasoline, EPA restrictions on energy production, and government subsidies to create and enforce the use of alternative energy, specifically wind and solar. However, controlling energy use in individual homes, now here's where it comes right down into your home, in individual homes provided a more difficult obstacle than mere taxes or regulations. Government needed to be able to monitor energy use and individual habits in every single home. And so, the smart meter was born. Smart meters read electric or gas usage and enable a power company to collect detailed usage data on a particular home or building. But the readings also gather personal information, which include unencrypted data that can reveal when a homeowner is away from their residence for too long a period of time. The electric wattage readings can even decipher what type of activities a customer is engaged in, such as watching TV, using a computer, or even how long someone spends time cooking. The meters are everywhere. Utilities have installed 50 million in homes across the United States, reaching about 43% of the homes overall. Digitimes reported that the global market for semiconductors used in smart meters that provide two-way communications between meters and utilities will continue to expand in the coming years, providing significant growth opportunities for semiconductor manufacturers, according to the IHS. Shipments of communicating meters are forecast to reach 132 million units in just 2015 and 150 million units in 2019. We're talking about globally here, folks. So, smart meters are being installed around the world. Analyst firm Berg Insight, based in Sweden, says that the worldwide installed base of smart electricity meters will grow at a compound annual growth rate of 26.6% between 2010 and 2016. Get this, to reach 602.7 million homes globally. Now, you say, wow, and so you say, what are they doing? Well, it's a move towards world governing body. They want to drill down and they want to know what's going on, not just in our government, not just in our regions or in our localities, but they want to know exactly what's going on in your home. They're drilling this right down to it. So, you say, wow, I didn't even know about that. Do you have a smart meter on your home? Think about it. You need to do some research and find out really what they're doing with that information. So, what is happening? What's really happening in September? That's the question, because I'm talking about a major move towards a world government and towards a union of this religious system. So when we get back to from the break, I'll show you what's happening in September at the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit. I think you're going to be interested to see how much it aligns right up with what the Bible prophesied for the very near future of this world governing body and world religious system.
In a world where our culture is traveling down a road of spiritual mediocrity, do you want to be one of the few who travel the road of spiritual maturity? Then I recommend Endtime University. This 6-semester course will guide you through understanding the Bible, keys to spiritual growth, life and teachings of Jesus Christ, and Satan defeated, sonship restored. Watch the lessons at your own pace using the structured outlines. Use the quizzes and answers to test your comprehension. Receive a completion certificate when you finish each semester, and a diploma from Endtime University once you've completed all 6 semesters. Matthew 7:13 through 14 says, "Enter in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many will go in. Because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Endtime University will help you walk the straight and narrow path to spiritual maturity. Call 1-800-ENDTIME and ask about Endtime University today.
I want to introduce you today to what I call the Armageddon Hospital. It was October of 2010. The headline, Israel builds world's largest underground hospital, immediately arrested my attention. When I read that it was being built in Haifa, Israel, I fully understood the implications of this announcement. Haifa is located at the western end of the plain of Megiddo, the prophesied site of the Battle of Armageddon. Would the world's largest underground hospital, specifically designed for use in time of war, actually become the hospital to which the wounded of the Battle of Armageddon would be brought? It was obvious to me that the answer to this question was undoubtedly yes.
Go to endtime.com and under Irvin's Thoughts, click the Rambam link to watch the video.
Welcome back to Politics and Religion. I'm discussing today the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit and what's coming up. It's a huge move towards a world governing body, and it's prophesied, the prophecy of a world government is prophesied in Revelation chapter 13, and that's what we're moving for, a totalitarian world governing body, and that's what's happening in September. So, the question is, what's happening in September? Well, the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit 2015, happening in New York in September of 25 through 27, the United Nations Summit for the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda. At this summit, the United Nations will adopt a new set of sustainable development goals to replace the Millennium Development Goals that will expire this year. The United Nations is committed to ensuring that these sustainable development goals are fully implemented and realized over the next 15 years or by 2030. So the United Nations has come up with 17 specific sustainable development goals that they want to use to manage the lives of every single person on the planet. This summit in September is being held so that they can reveal these goals to the nations of the world and get them to sign on to and commit to the implementation of these goals in their own countries. It is nothing more than a management meeting. Think about that. We all go to management meetings. This is nothing more than a management meeting for the governments of the entire planet. The outcome document for this summit is called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So, the new agenda, now I want you to just picture this. This is their agenda. This is what they say we're going to manage the world by for the next 15 years. The new agenda is guided by the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. So there it is, including full respect for international law. Now, like I said before, the Charter, if you remember, the Charter of the United Nations was written by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy. And the United Nations still adheres to that charter today. So if you think about that, it was designed to be a communistic one world government in 1945. They still adhere to those principles today in their charter. When I hear those comments like that, I always remember the article that I read from the Council on Foreign Relations titled "The United Nations in the Future of Global Governance," which stated, as we adapt to the emerging global threats, let's not lose sight of what we have achieved. The UN has largely fulfilled the chartered goals established in San Francisco 67 years ago. It's now 70 years ago now. And in doing so has spawned an extensive body of international laws, treaties, norms, and practices, and institutions that govern most facets of interstate relations. With these apps, the UN Charter has become the world's central operating system, the motherboard of global governance. So it's not even hidden anymore. They're telling what it is. It's a global government, and that's what these sustainable development goals are, and that's what, when they say this is all designed based off the principles of the Charter, it all goes back to a global government, folks. So, the September Summit Outcome Document goes on to say, we reaffirm the outcomes of all major UN conferences and summits, which have laid a solid foundation for the sustainable development and have helped to shape the new agenda. This includes the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, or Rio Plus 20. Well, of course, you know that the Rio Plus 20 is where the United Nations reaffirmed its commitment to the implementation of Agenda 21. Located in the September Summit's outcome document is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 accompanying targets that they hope to implement on a global scale. Does the United Nations believe in more governance? Absolutely. The Sustainable Development Goals are basically the Millennium Development Goals on steroids. The Sustainable Development Goals replace the Millennium Development Goals that expire this year. So if you remember that there were 8 Millennium Development Goals with 18 basic targets, and now there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 targets. They're really trying to drill down and push home this world government. So here are just a few of those 17 that might be of interest to you. Number one, they want to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. And they want to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by the 2030, achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. Well, the United Nations describes social protection as the missing piece in a fair and inclusive globalization. Social protection floors contribute to the redistribution of wealth. Redistribution of wealth is a socialistic platform of the United Nations. It's world government, folks. They're wanting to take from the industrialized, developed nations, tax them, and give the money to the underdeveloped nations. It's wealth redistribution. It's what climate change is all about. They're talking about it right here in social protection. And it's number one on the list. Goal number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Support and strengthen the participation of local communities. There we are back to our local communities, not our governments, our local communities, in improving water and sanitation management. So the United Nations wants to come in and manage how our consumption of water, clean water programs. You say, well, that's all great. Yeah, it is great, but I don't want the United Nations coming in and dictating that to me. We signed a Declaration of Independence, not interdependence, on the United Nations. Goal number 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. By 2030, they want to upgrade infrastructure and retrofit industries to make them sustainable. Why is the United Nations concerned about infrastructure and our factories here in the United States? Because they want to manage the globe. They want to manage the entire world. It's a world governing body. It was established back in 1945 to be that. Goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. Now they're wanting to get down to our factories. They're wanting to control everything. Goal number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Think about that. So that's where the smart meters and all these different things, they want to control your consumption and your production methods. They're drilling it down to where every aspect of your life. Goal 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Implement the commitment undertaken by developed country parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to a goal of mobilizing jointly $100 billion annually by 2020 from all sources to address the needs of developing countries. And then note, it says that since global warming, my note is, since global warming and climate change is a hoax, this is nothing more than a wealth redistribution scheme by the United Nations. It goes on to say that acknowledging that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the primary international intergovernmental forum for negotiating the global response to climate change. So what they did, they've created this hoax, and then they've said, well, now we need a world government to manage that hoax. And it's a world governing body. They're pushing for every aspect of control of your life. Goal number 16 was to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for the sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries and the institution, they slid it in there, of global governance. They actually state that in this in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So they tell you right there, they're going to implement global governance in this. Folks, this has been happening in America for years. Remember, Bill Clinton signed Executive Order number 12852 way back in 1993 to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development in order to harmonize U.S. environmental policy with UN directives as outlined in Agenda 21. So, as you look at this, the world governing body, the world government established in 1945 to be a communistic one world government. The charter states it in no uncertain terms. All the nations of the world give their sovereignty or pledge their allegiance to this one world governing body. Because we just had two wars. We had World War I, World War II. On the heels of World War II, what's the solution? World government. The United Nations is established. World War II ended in 1945. 1945, the United Nations is established. They tried it with the League of Nations after World War I, but it didn't work. So they said, well, hey, we need a bigger crisis, because in times of crisis, you can get things done that you could never get done before. You can't just show up one day and say, we're having a world government, everybody in the United States, give your sovereignty to this world governing body. It would have been, we'd have went to war. But what they do is they'll come in and say, okay, all the nations of the world have agreed to this, and so we're going to implement those, and we need a big enough crisis. So we had World War I, then on the heels of that we had the League of Nations. Well, that wasn't a big enough crisis. So then they had World War II, 52 million killed. On the heels of that, that was the next crisis. On the heels of that, the next attempt at a world government, or the United Nations. Well, now they don't have the teeth that they really want. So, or they can't just dictate things and people do them. So consequently, guess what's coming? The Bible predicts another world war. Or Revelation chapter 9, verse 13 through 21, World War III. And it's going to emanate out of the Middle East region. That's the next crisis that comes. On the other side of that, we will move into a fully functional world governing body. So what happens to America? In the next segment, I'll give you a little hope about what happens to America, and we don't want to be involved in this United Nations world governing body.
One day I was listening to Politics and Religion, much like you are now, when a commercial came on about the Salvation Package. It's a set of 4 DVDs in which Irvin teaches about topics like Nicodemus' question to Jesus, "What must I do to be born again?" I remember Irvin said in the commercial, "If you don't love the truth, don't get this because it will make you mad." Well, I was hungry for the truth, so I did get it, and I am so glad I did. I'd been studying the Bible for many years, but learned there was more in the Scriptures about what it means to be born again. When the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus said, "Take heed of false teaching, for many will come in my name and deceive many." Now I know what Jesus was talking about when he made that statement, and I won't be deceived. The salvation package changed my life and my eternity. I'm so thankful for that commercial I heard just a few years ago. That's why today I wanted to record one too, for someone out there listening, searching for the truth. You will find it in the salvation package. Get the 4 DVD set for $65 or the individual DVDs for $20 each.
Welcome back to Politics and Religion. And what we're discussing today is the Sustainable Development Summit that's coming up at the end of September, and how it's a move towards a one world governing body, and how the Pope is going to be speaking on the 25th at 9 o'clock in the morning. And he's going to be advocating this. He's going to be supporting or promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. He's talking about climate change, all these different things. So it's a merger, it's a union of politics and religion. We're watching it happen. The Pope's encyclical was all about climate change, the support for a world governing body to manage that, and he mentions sustainable development 21 specific times in that climate encyclical. So we know it's a merger. It's the supporting of this world religious body for a world government that's going to be set up. So, in looking at the information that I've just given you on this world governing body, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it clear by now what we are seeing here? It's the United Nations, everybody. It's a world governing body. This is nothing else than an attempt to absolutely control every human on earth. Now, I haven't read all 169 of the staples there's 17 goals, 169 specific staples that they want to implement. I haven't read all of them. If you go read them all, they want to control every single aspect of your life. The entire premise of the United Nations is that humans cannot or will not manage themselves. Therefore, they must be governed by a select group of more disciplined or better educated humans, i.e., globalists, internationalists, etc. And since the supposed global warming and climate change hoax, poverty, lack of drinking water, inequality, overconsumption, etc., 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 it doesn't matter what it is affecting the entire planet, then a global management solution is mandatory to regulate every aspect of life for each person on the globe. At the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit on September 25th through the 27th, the United Nations will adopt the post-2015 development agenda for the next 15 years. The specific document is called Transforming Our World. I want you to remember that. Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Advocates of a one world government are actually willing to yield up their sovereignty, and they will be some of the ones that conform to the future world governing body. They'll walk right into it happily. You say, well, man, I can't see anybody who would do that. They're going to be on the wrong side of the Lord when He comes back. Listen at it, for instance. Many of you have heard this, but Walter Cronkite, most of you know him, America's newsman, made the following remarks when accepting the Norman Cousins Global Governance Award in 1999. It shows you how long this stuff's been happening. He states, this is Walter Cronkite, "I am greatly honored to receive this Norman Cousins Global Governance Award for 2 reasons. First, I believe, as Norman Cousins did, that the first priority of humankind in this era is to establish an effective system of world law that will assure peace and justice among the peoples of the world. It seems to many of us that if we are to avoid the eventual catastrophic world conflict, we must strengthen the United Nations and as a first step toward a world government, patterned after our own government with a legislature, executive, and judiciary, and police to enforce its international laws and keep the peace. To do that, of course, we Americans will have to yield up some of our sovereignty. I'm not willing to do that, Mr. Cronkite. That would be a bitter pill. It would take a lot of courage, a lot of faith in this new order. Today, we must develop federal structures on a global level. We need a system of enforceable law, world law, a democratic federal world government to deal with world problems. So, folks, this is the same thought process which drives all globalists, federalists, or internationalists, those that believe in a world government. They are on a mission to establish a world governing body, an all-powerful one world government. And I've got to be honest with you, they're actually succeeding. Most nations around the world actually have a fully functional national ID system. They have agenda implemented through every fabric, every fiber of their society. All of these things have been implemented, and in many ways we're already under the reign of a fully functional world governing body. However, there is hope. I don't want to go through this and just give you all the negative, because you say, well, what about America, Dave? Give me some hope for those living here in the United States. Well, in Daniel chapter 7, God gave Daniel a vision of major nations that would be on the earth at the second coming of Jesus Christ. They are Great Britain, the United States, Germany, Russia, and the European Union. If you understand what we teach about modern nations in the Bible, you'll see what I'm saying is true. I can't take time to prove it right now. When you jump 650 years later, when you jump from Daniel chapter 7 to Revelation 13, God gave John a vision of these exact same nations joined together to form a world governing body, a world government. However, the United States, the eagle's wings that broke off the lion in Daniel chapter 7 is not mentioned in that prophecy. So you say, well, what happened to the eagle's wings? Well, the eagle's wings are mentioned again in Revelation chapter 12, verse 14, which appears to indicate that we will stand with Israel till the very end, when it says, "And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent." So this is describing the 3.5 year time period known as the Great Tribulation. And you can read these verses for yourself. Regardless of the current administration's underlying rift with Israel, it appears from this scripture that we will stand with Israel all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But in order to do this, we need a spiritual revival in this nation. Did you know that our current administration has actually considered a change in the protective posture of the United States towards Israel at the United Nations? Earlier this year, Politico reported that in the wake of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decisive re-election, the Obama administration is revisiting longtime assumptions about America's role as a shield for Israel against international pressure. Angered by Netanyahu's hardline platform towards the Palestinians, top Obama officials would not rule out the possibility of a change in American posture at the United Nations, where the U.S. has historically fended off resolutions hostile to Israel. So what happened was, just before his election, Netanyahu said, there's not going to be a two-state solution on my watch. And the Obama administration started saying, well, hey, that's the only solution to this Middle East conflict. If you don't want to do that, we might have to pull back that veto that we've always had to protect you at the international body, of the United Nations. So consequently, we've got to get away from that. Let me tell you, everyone, if we want to be the blessings of God on our nation, we better stand with Israel all the way to the end. I can't be emphatic enough on that. We've got to stand with Israel. God told Abraham that He would bless those that blessed him and that He would curse those that cursed him. So any true Christian will stand with Israel. If you know anything about the Bible at all, you know that God promised Abraham the land of Israel through his lineage of Isaac 3,500 years ago. And if we want this to be a Christian nation and be blessed by God, we will need to stand with Israel as a nation all the way to the end. This is the only hope we have against the one world government. We need to pull out of that, pull out of the world governing body, and stand with Israel all the way to the end. We've got to pray to that end, because remember, in Revelation 13, the United States is not mentioned in that global governing body. So in summary, in the time I have left, there's a prophesied world government prophesied in Revelation 13. We know that global warming is just a ruse by the global elite to establish a world government. Pope Francis is advocating a true world political authority to manage this supposed crisis. The Bible foretells that in the end time, the world will be ruled by a world government. This global political authority will demand the allegiance of all world citizens and endeavor to control every aspect of their life. Hence, the Sustainable Development Summit coming up in September. In order for there to be complete obeisance among the populace, a one world religious system will be established to advocate devotion to the world governing system by all the religions of the world. It appears that we are witnessing just such a merger right before our very eyes. So what I wanted to do for you today is to kind of give you a warning to show you how much we are already under the reins of a world governing body right now, and to give you a heads up to what's coming in the latter part of September, because it's already it's like sweeping us by storm. And a lot of these things are already implemented here in the United States. We can see them. Check your local governments and different things. It doesn't matter how big your town is. It doesn't have to be a metroplex. They want to come right down into every citizen's home. And I would encourage you, go read these sustainable development goals. They're for everybody to see. And do your research, study up on this stuff, because we need to pull out of the United Nations and stand with Israel all the way to the end. Because if we want this nation to be blessed by God, then we've got to stand with Israel. We can't be pulling back that veto. We've got to stand with Israel all the way to the end, because I want to be blessed by God. If you understand the Bible at all, America's got to stand with Israel and join us, join Endtime Ministries in standing with Israel, and pray for the United States of America.
Politics and Religion is a production of Endtime Ministries. It is a daily 1-hour broadcast dedicated to bringing you the prophetic fulfillments happening on a daily basis.
If you would like to listen to archive shows, subscribe to Endtime Magazine, find a prophecy conference in your area, order Endtime resources, watch our TV show, or subscribe to our free weekly e-news, call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and take advantage of what our site has to offer.
Connect to Endtime Ministries by partnering with us and help this message make a global impact.
Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to all of our loyal partners, listeners, and friends for helping make Politics and Religion and Endtime Ministries possible.